Hello, we're live. Rotoworld, Fantasy Baseball Q&A. Eric Samulski, James Schiano, 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. James, how you doing?
Great, Eric. I like that. Was like more of like a drive time radio intro. 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. We're ready to talk.
We're just trying out some different things right now,
I love it.
seeing how it goes. We are a week away from the All-Star break. We are getting into silly season in terms of trade deadline rumors, in terms of playoff odds, all that kind of stuff. We're here to take any and all of your questions, fantasy baseball related, real baseball related. If you want to talk about trade deadline stuff, awesome. You want to talk about prospects, awesome. You want to talk about what's happening to the Yankees, more than happy to talk about that. And any fantasy baseball stuff as well. We're feeling good about all this. James, let me ask you a Mets question first before we get going. Gives everybody a chance. Get your questions in on YouTube. Get your questions in on Twitch. We will answer them, the next 45-ish minutes or so as we get going. There's been a lot of chatter on Mets Twitter about Lindor being overlooked for the All-Star game yet again as a Met. I know the batting average was pretty low. I'm just curious, as both a fantasy baseball writer, but also as a Mets fan, do you feel like there's legitimate beef with Lindor not making the team? I know all-star teams are a little bit like, who cares? But, I do think it also plays into the idea of like how we're evaluating a season. Like, I know people are saying he's struggling, and he's been like a talk of like, has he not lived up to the hype this year? But I think, batting average aside, it's been a pretty solid year overall for Lindor.
Even with the batting average, it's ticked up to 250, which isn't like what you want to see normally from like where we think about baseball stars and in the trend like scape of the world. But that's still quite good for the modern game. It's not something that'll tear a guy down, especially with an OPS over 750 and 15 homers and 16 steals. It is ridiculous. I always tell myself I'm not going to get mad about these things, but then it comes around and I'm like, why has he not been an all-star? Like since 2019, he's the 7th most WAR in baseball, and he's never made an all-star team. Every guy ahead of him has made multiple all-star teams, and he kind of got screwed over a little bit by the fact that the Nationals needed someone to go, and that guy was CJ Abrams. So then that was the third shortstop on the National League roster because Trey Turner got voted in, which that's also kind of ridiculous. And that comes back to the whole Mets fans' view of Francisco Lindor, that they don't really – I think a lot of them do love him, but I think there's enough of a subset of Mets fans that don't love him that he'll never get voted in. So a guy like Trey Turner, who's only played 35 some odd games this year, gets voted in. And it also always comes back to the shape of a player's season, where you have a guy like Marcus Semien, who over his last 90 plate appearances dating back almost a month is hitting 120 with a 5 WRC+. Francisco Lindor did that for the first 15 games of his season. So that just had every single day in a box score, you saw Francisco Lindor batting average 122, 097. So that kind of puts an idea in people's minds that Francisco Lindor is not having a good season. And then he has a torrid stretch, goes bonkers for the last 2 months. Is once again one of the best players in baseball. I think he's back to being a top 5 player in the National League in WAR overall. And no one recognized it because this idea started that he was having such a bad season. When Marcus Semien could hide a miserable 3 weeks in the middle of his season, and now he's an American League All-Star over a guy like Jordan Westburg, who probably is more deserving with or without this cold stretch from Semien. So it's just he's become perpetually underrated, and it's frustrating. And
that's a good tip for us for fantasy baseball purposes too, right? We overreact to the early season surges and cold stretches, and we create a narrative that that's what the player is doing, and we don't account for the ability to change and shift and evolve. It's interesting. I'm particularly not a fan of like Luis Arias making the All-Star team, even though he is essentially a DH who can't run or hit for power. But okay, whatever, fine. He has a really high batting average. I get that. Anyway, what are you going to do? Dave had the first comment. Thought you and James showed a lot of chemistry last week. Looking forward to today. Thanks, Dave. We appreciate that. We are also looking forward to today. Make sure you get those comments, questions in. Let us know anything that you want to talk about. We'll make sure we get to that within the course of this show. Like this question from Dad. Hey, Dad. Tyler Glasnow strikeout numbers have been phenomenal, but he's rapidly approaching his career high of innings pitched, which was 120 in 2023. Knowing that and his injury history at 30 years old, do we sell and what for? I think it's a really good question with guys like Glasnow, with guys like Sale, Garrett Crochet. We got a lot of guys who are probably within the top 10 of starting pitchers right now in terms of their overall effectiveness, who are approaching territory we have not seen from them either ever or in a really long time. If you're talking about selling, you have to also understand that everybody in your league is aware of these same risks. So you're not going to get current value, or you're not going to get Tyler Glasnow might be the second, third best pitcher in baseball right now from a fantasy perspective. You're not going to get that in return because everybody else knows about the innings concerns. I'm more inclined to hold at this point in time, given that I don't think that you're going to get value. And also with somebody like Glasnow, yes, like the Dodgers are trying to make the postseason this year. They're not going to run him into the ground, but I don't think they're not going to shut him down. They may give him a little extra rest here and there. But also Glasnow's injury history is really interesting to me because he spoke openly this offseason about the fact that it was really the same injury. And every time he was getting MRIs, it kept showing that his UCL was intact, his UCL was intact, his UCL was intact. And the reason that was the case was because the UCL was intact. It was just off the bone. Ew. So it wasn't showing up initially on the MRI because the ligament itself wasn't torn. It was just off the bone. So by the time he finally got his Tommy John surgery, it was basically the same injury he had been dealing with for 3 years. So it wasn't like he was perpetually injured over and over and over again. It was the same injury. And so I don't think it's crazy if he goes up to 150 or plus innings this year. And sure, he may get skipped to start. They may do a 6-man rotation for a little bit in the second half of the year. I just can't see selling Glasnow unless you're getting somebody to give you full freight for what he's doing right now.
I feel like sometimes we'd be a lot better at fantasy baseball if we had MDs and we could assess what these injuries actually were. Because I didn't even hear that. That's ridiculous. There was research done. I can't remember who, but I'm mad about it. I heard, talk about it on Rates and Barrels that there's a growing theory that the UCL isn't a tendon that fully develops until a pitcher is say 26, 27, even 28 years old. So that's kind of why a lot of times I feel like we see these pitchers come up and kind of go back and forth on and off the IL. But eventually you hit this period of your career where then you just seem to be healthy and this pitch forever feeling like we had for all these years from Scherzer and Verlander and Glasnow, Sale. And I think even Tarek Skubal kind of fits into this lot where if you think that you can get the fair value, like you said, Eric, I would consider trading them, but I would probably be much more willing to do that if I had one, either a depth issue, or two, if I was playing in a standard Roto format where I'd already accumulated and banked the stats that these guys have given me. And I think I can either hang on to a spot or chase something else just based on what I could get. But if you're in any kind of head-to-head league, you have to hold these guys as long as you can, because no matter what, you want them for the last game of the season. That's how you win a head-to-head league. So it's worth risking the injury because getting depth won't help you win a league like that. Getting depth will help you win a rotisserie league, a 5x5 standard, something that runs your stats all year. But you're not going to get a first-round caliber bat probably right now for Glasnow in a standard 5x5. You're just not. So with doing that, you have to recreate him in the aggregate, and that's probably just not worth it. There's no point trying to forecast and predict an injury, especially from a guy like Glasnow that there's not an innings limit. I'm sure they want to keep him at a certain spot, but it's not going to be a hard shutdown like some of the young pitchers and prospects we have in the league, or guys immediately back from very devastating injuries. Dodgers need him in September and October, and fantasy managers will too. So he's going to pitch, and it's not worth trying to predict an injury.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting argument for if you could get a pitcher like say Pablo Lopez, right, who we think of as having ace upside and has started to right the ship a little bit, but is struggling. If you needed hitting and you could get Pablo Lopez and a legitimate early round hitter, or close to an early round hitter for Glasnow, now you're looking at okay, I might be taking a small step back pitching wise, but I'm getting a pitcher with upside, and I'm also making a major improvement hitting wise. I could see an argument like that. Maybe somebody's really worried about Bobby Miller, and if you could get Bobby Miller and a good bat for Glasnow, it's a risk, right? Because you're taking a shot on a pitcher who we thought had legit upside coming into the year, who has not delivered on that, and that's why the other manager might be willing to trade them. But again, that if you really needed the offense, that's a risk you could take. But I'm more than happy to just hold on to Glasnow right now. I think they're going to monitor his innings, but I don't think they like have a hard number they're capping him at. Like he's going to be in the rotation for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's pretty vital with the new playoff format to grab those first 2 seeds, and they're pretty safe to do that, but they're going to have to play a little harder likely than usual through August to do that.
Yeah. Eddie says, hello, Eric and James. Hello, Eddie. Happy to be here today. I'm looking forward to Jacob Wilson being called up by the A's sometime soon. Me too. For those of you who don't know Jacob Wilson, I don't know that it's a stretch to say that Jacob Wilson is the best contact hitter in minor league baseball right now. I mean, I think he has like a 99% zone contact rate. It's utterly stupid. There's a stat, actually, Baseball America posted this 1 hour ago. In his first 9 games back from the IL, Jacob Wilson has swung at 74 pitches, and he missed 3 of them.
Nice.
Which is absolutely absurd. This is a guy who is hitting 461 with 24 doubles in just 42 games this year. His strikeout rate is 7%. The bat to ball skills are ridiculous here at shortstop for the A's. The power is like 15 homer power, and he's not really going to steal a lot. So that is something you need to keep in mind, right? That from a fantasy perspective, Jacob Wilson is a batting average first asset who you hope will hit at the top of the order and give you runs and RBIs. But if he comes up for Oakland this year, would be in a pretty mediocre lineup. And so like, I think that caps his fantasy upside a little bit. I think you're going to really like the batting average, and I think the rest of it is going to be just fine. And then the question is just when they call him up, right? Like it could be any day now. Max Schumann is playing pretty well at the start of July. I don't think Max Schumann is blocking Jacob Wilson, but it may halt the promotion for a week or 2 or whatever until they can either get rid of Max Schumann or say, hey, you're playing poorly enough, we're done, right? They're not going to bench him when he's hitting 350 over the last 6 games. They're going to wait for that to go down a little bit or move him to another spot. Who knows?
Yeah, Schumann, if I might be wrong, but I think he's someone who has moved around in the past. And Wilson, it is fun. Something disappointing about this hardcore contact first profile, especially a guy with 55 grade speed, as per Fangraphs, is he has not attempted a stolen base since he returned from injury at AAA. And then also there's always the idea of you have to take these AAA PCL stats with a grain of salt. Las Vegas is one of the best places to hit in all of the minor leagues. And I think a 500 batting average across 9 games since coming off the IL is pretty special no matter where it is, especially with 1 strikeout. But there's definitely going to be, I mean, he was only drafted last year. There's always going to be a massive learning curve. He's probably not coming up as a 300 hitter. You might get the hot week, but then I don't know. I would be concerned of like spending a ton. I mean, there's not going to be many big fab guys left,
right?
But I'd be concerned with a ton of fab left for a guy who, over best case scenario, 70 games, 65 games the rest of the season, you might get 5 homers and 3 steals. Even with the 300 average, it's probably not going to drive standings a ton. Even though I think he's still a great player, it could be really fun. I just think that he might not completely change leagues.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made that I would actually prefer his teammate Colby Thomas, or his athletics organization teammate Colby Thomas, over Jacob Wilson for fantasy for this year, because Thomas is a guy with power speed who has a more direct replacement, because I think the A's are moving Brent Rooker. The A's have said they want to move Brent Rooker. There's no reason for the A's not to move Brent Rooker. The Phillies want Brent Rooker. Like it seems like it's going to happen. And then Colby Thomas seems like a clear call up. This is a guy who in 59 games at AA earlier in the year hit 282 with 14 homers and 12 steals. Between AA and AAA, he has 15 homers and 14 steals in 76 games. So there's some power speed there with Colby Thomas, where I think he could give you 5 category juice, where the batting average is going to be like probably 250 at the major league level. And Wilson is going to have a much better batting average, but Thomas is going to have more homers, more speed. And so I might be more interested in Thomas for fantasy leagues this year. And to Eddie's point, yeah, I'm not suggesting that Max Schumann is part of the rebuild. I'm just saying when you have a major league regular who is producing right now, Schumann is hitting 350 over the last 6 games. I'm not saying it's gonna continue, but you're either most likely trying to keep the value up so you can see if anybody wants to trade for him, or just get the most out of that asset until there's nothing more to get out of that asset, and then you move on. So I don't think Schumann is blocking Wilson, but I think Schumann is like maybe could delay a call up a week or two. But again, Schumann has played second. Schumann has played the outfield, so he can move around. If your question seems to be that you can throw Jacob Wilson into a trade as a sweetener, listen, I think Jacob Wilson has the potential to be a much better real life player than fantasy player, which happens to be the case with guys who are batting average first. And he's batting average first on a poor team. So, him hitting 310 for the A's, let's say he does that. Okay, who's driving him in? Who is he driving in? Right? Those counting stats could hurt. And then the fact that he has like 15 homer upside and isn't running, this may be the time to sell high on Jacob Wilson. And we talked about, Scott Pianowski and I talked about this on the podcast when Jackson Holliday got called up, where it was like, in a redraft league, now may be the time to trade Jackson Holliday, because there's no time where a prospect's hype is higher than like right when they get called up, or right when everybody is like, this guy is getting called up. And so in a redraft format, Jacob Wilson's hype may never be higher. In a dynasty or a keeper league, you may really want that batting average, but I don't know. I mean, do you think like Jacob Wilson is somebody you'd kick yourself for getting rid of in a redraft league?
Again, probably not a redraft league, a certain points league where he can just pepper singles and drive up your point total. I'd like him more. I just over the weekend declined a dynasty trade for Jacob Wilson. I thought about it for a while, and it was a weird one. I'm falling down the standings a little bit. I went from first to second. The distance between me and first is lengthening, and now I'm in this like big mishmash of everyone from fourth to second. And someone offered me Nolan Jones for Jacob Wilson, where I was like, there's like, some part of me is like, I just would love, and it's a 5x5 with OPS. I was like, some part of me just wants to see if I can grab the next Nolan Jones hot streak and get lucky. But I was like, Wilson's probably up soon. There's probably not much of a difference. So I thought about it hard before waivers ran Monday, but I walked away from it. But still on the table, I still might think about it. But in a redraft, I don't even think I'd hold any qualms trading Jacob Wilson at all.
Got to get value while you can. Michael Mendez has a cool question, just because it's interesting to think about all these players and what they bring to the table. He's wondering if we would drop any of Andres Jimenez, Michael Garcia, or Noelvi Marte for Luis Garcia, Zach Geloff, or Anthony Volpe. Marte has really struggled, Noelvi Marte, and Marte struggled in AAA. I think he's going to be good, so I'm not concerned. But I don't like, in a redraft format, I don't know that Noelvi Marte is a must hold player. If you have somebody you can pick up that could be better, there's some interesting guys here. Like, so for me, Geloff is by far the lowest of that trio of Luis Garcia and Volpe. And I know Volpe has not been good over the last like 6 weeks, but I think the power speed that he possesses is interesting for fantasy. According to the Fangraphs player rater, Luis Garcia Jr. is the 7th ranked middle infield eligible player over the last month. Over his last 100 plate appearances, he's hitting 292 with 18 RBIs, 5 home runs, and 4 steals. Like, I kind of think he needs to be added with the way he's swinging the bat right now, and the fact that he's still a young player who, was a prospect of note and is clearly making gains. And so like, I get that Zach Geloff also has that power and speed, but Zach Geloff's batting average is just 247 over the last 30 days. And that's with a strikeout rate that's like pushing 40%. Like, even though he's playing well, his strikeout rate is like 37% over the last month. And so I'm not seeing any real gains in Geloff's plate discipline.
No.
I don't know how, in terms of just the guys to add, I don't know. Would you prefer Volpe over somebody like Luis Garcia because of upside? Are you going with Garcia because of how well he's been playing? How are you approaching that?
Guess the last time Anthony Volpe hit a home run. Guess the day.
It was in April. Is that true?
was just after April. It was May 16th. And that was against the Minnesota Twins, who the Yankees have superpowers against. So I don't even know if we can count that. But since Volpe hit that last home run, his OPS has dropped about a clean 130 points. And it's just not – he seems like he might have overcompensated what used to be a swing with a lot of loft to try and have this level approach that people really liked for some reason early in the season. And now he just no longer has power. And privately among some Yankees fans, friends, and family, I call him Mr. Singles. And people get very upset about that. But from this group, Garcia is, I think, weirdly and objectively the most fun, but that's just because the shape of the season is always going to be insane, where he had that crazy April and then he didn't hit for basically 6 weeks. And now in the last 5 games, he has, I think, 4 home runs and like 9 RBIs. He just keeps driving the ball. And something else I really love about Garcia is that he's a left-handed batter. So he just will have that platoon advantage. A lot of players in this list will not. Noel V, the under the hood stuff has looked so bad since he's come back. He seems like a player who's very clearly pressing, trying to show that the PEDs had nothing to do with his success, and they might not have anything to do with his success, but now he's just swinging at every single pitch since he's returned, and it's not.
Some of those swings last night were terrible.
Really bad. I had him stashed in Redraft League, and I was really excited, the 12 team, and now if he doesn't do something crazy by the end of the week, I'm fully dropping him waivers next Sunday. Because there's no reason to have this guy on a roster in a 12-team league. But then you have Jimenez, who I don't know what guy isn't click. We were talking about Lindor before. I feel like a lot of times in April we had all the, oh my God, the Guardians won this trade. Look how high Andres Jimenez's WAR is after 6 weeks of baseball. Now it's like, oh, his WRC plus is 85. Maybe they didn't win this trade, but this is a list where. I don't know. I know everyone gets really frustrated with Michael because he's always close to doing something, but never actually does it. But he at least might be in the best lineup, besides Volpe, of course. But Volpe now is moving down, and the bottom of the Yankee lineup is poor. I don't know. To me, it's probably Garcia, Michael, Jimenez, Volpe, Noel V, Geloff, or Geloff, Noel V, either way.
I think I could see dropping Noel V for Luis Garcia, and I would even drop Noel V Marte for Volpe because I think they're both struggling and not playing well, and I think that Volpe has a higher fantasy ceiling than Noel V Marte because of the power speed, but I would pick up Garcia first. I will say what's interesting, Scott Pianowski and I did a show last week where we looked at waiver wire hitters by just looking at Fangraphs leaderboards, and I had I looked at the StatCast rolling expected WOBA leaderboard, and Andres Jimenez showed up on the top of that leaderboard, and it was like, what is he doing that is making StatCast think that he's going to see an improvement? And we recorded this a week and a half ago, and in 6 games in July, he's hitting 348. And I understand that's only 6 games, but the idea is like his rolling, the expected WOBA was increasing because the quality of contact was getting better, even though the results weren't there. And so he was popping on lists of like, hey, you should add this guy, but nothing was showing up. And now we're starting to see things show up. So even in a small sample size, I put those 2 things together, and I'm holding him at least to see if this builds into anything. So I could see dropping Noel V for Luis Garcia. I'd be holding on to Jimenez and Michael Garcia for a little while longer.
Yeah, and Jimenez has always been very streaky just because he's such a contact-oriented player who chases a lot. And you're always going to make yourself more prone to hot and cold streaks.
Yes. HPHP is asking this question about Noel, which I believe is Johnkensey Noel for the Guardians. What do you do with Noel in a head-to-head 12-team OBP league? Well, first of all, if it's not a daily moves league, like a daily lineup moves league, I think you drop. Because right now he's playing primarily against lefties. That will continue to be the case if he doesn't rein in the swing and the miss. He has a nearly 40% strikeout rate in 9 games. The power is legit. OBP leagues, he doesn't get a huge boost because he doesn't really walk. Like an OPS league would be a different story because of that power. So he's not really an OBP asset. The strikeout rate is poor. And unless something changes, I don't really see him playing that regularly against right-handed pitching. I'm holding him in an OPS league currently, but that's because it's daily roster moves. And it's deep benches, so there's like nobody on the waivers that has his upside. But I don't know that he needs to be held in many formats, and I'm only holding him because that's an OPS league.
Johnkensey has a bad thing happening with his profile right now where pitchers are refusing to throw him pitches in the strike zone. His zone rate is under 40%, one of the few players. I know it's only been 100 pitches, but league average for that's always going to be about 50%, give or take a percentage point. And he's chasing 50% of pitches he's seen outside the strike zone, swing at 61%. So he's up there taking hacks. And I understand why he's doing that, because when he makes contact, the ball goes really far, and he seems to have relatively good. It's strange to say this because he just swings and misses so often, but the hit tool seems to be good because whenever pitch is in the zone, he punishes it. But I think not comparing these players, there's a lesson to be learned from the first 2 weeks of Ben Rice and now what's going to happen with Johnkensey Noel for the next 10 days, because that, again, they're very dissimilar, where the fact that Ben Rice is great plate discipline, so that kept him in the order and wound up pushing him to the top. But there might just be a hot streak here, and you're probably not seeing a guy like you just said, Eric, on waivers that can get as hot as Johnkensey Noel. So you might as well just ride it till the wheels fall off. Let the Guardians demote him, and then you can demote him as well. But just because if he's on the roster, they're like, there might be a chance. There might be a chance. There might be a chance. You might miss the 3 home run, 7 RBI game like Ben Rice.
Oh my God. Like Ben Rice. Speaking of recent call-ups, Jetta says Brooke Lee's start has been amazing. Now his third base eligibility, is it sustainable? Well, first of all, this level isn't sustainable. But him being a good player is certainly sustainable. Brooks Lee is a really useful prospect. He was somebody who was ranked, I think, top 50, maybe even top like 40 in most places, and higher in some too. The hit tool is very, very real. I don't buy the power he was showcasing in AAA that came with a 30% homer to fly ball rate. You think it was like 6 home runs and 13 games or something. Like, that's not who he is, but he has power. Like, he's a 15 to 20 homer guy right now with the chance to grow into more of it. He's not a big runner, so in a full season you might get 5 or 6 steals, but he can hit and he can play all over the field. So like the question about like what happens to him when Royce Lewis comes back. Well, first of all, Royce Lewis has to come back, right?
Yeah.
Sadly, that has always been an issue. But Brooks Lee was playing second base in the minors before Royce Lewis got hurt, because they were going to move Brooks Lee to second and let Willie Castro do what Willie Castro was supposed to do originally, which is play all over the field. So I think Brooks Lee has just jumped Edouard Julian, and there's just going to be no more Edouard Julian at second base for the Twins. And it will be Brooks Lee at second if Royce Lewis comes back up. So I think his spot in the lineup is super secure. I would love to see him hit higher in the lineup. He's been hitting like 7th and 8th, which isn't great for run production. But I would not be like looking to get out from underneath this. I think that Brooks Lee is a really good hitter who is maybe a little bit less of a contact hitter than Jacob Wilson, but will have a little more power than Jacob Wilson, and they both won't really run. And Brooks Lee is in a better lineup if you try to compare prospect stuff. And
Brooks Lee's a switch hitter, so apologize, I don't have the splits based on his handedness for this, but through the minor leagues, he's always ran pull rates well into the 40%, and now with just a few games in the major leagues, he's over 50%, and that's not a decent enough sample, and that will change. But the fact that he's someone who seems to get pull, and he also has fly ball rates have usually been around the high 20s, which again isn't great, but it's someone who probably will get more power because there's some added loft in that swing, just being able to pull the ball consistently that he probably should get. And he's been really good to plate discipline. I love seeing this plate discipline when a guy comes up. They just won't expand the strike zone. They won't really swing and miss very often. At least just gives you a floor more than a ceiling, but it's something that we've only seen it for 60 pitches right now, but there's growing confidence that he will be someone who doesn't expand the zone very much. So it's a little bit harder to get him out. He's going to get into longer at bats. He's going to get himself into more advantageous situations at the plate, probably. But it seems legit-ish, not this legit, but fun to watch.
For sure. That Twins offense is getting really good. If Royce Lewis comes back, it's going to be a deep lineup, and they could be set up for some postseason success. Mason S says, thanks for all you do. Thanks, Mason.
Welcome, Mason.
Just talking baseball, hanging out. We appreciate that you enjoy it. HPHP says, drop Cade Povich. I understand wanting to after his last start. My thoughts on Cade Povich are kind of unchanged. I don't think he has any elite pitch. I don't think his fastball is particularly good. His fastball got lit up in that last start. I think Cade Povich is a solid enough pitcher in a good home ballpark with a good team context around him who will have to get by mixing and matching a deep arsenal of pitches because he doesn't have anything that's like truly elite. And so that is going to lead to some bad starts, especially when he's young and still learning how to attack major league hitters. And that's a profile that tends to get better with experience, like, say, Chris Bassett, right? Like those guys who have lots of Merrill Kelly, those guys who have lots of pitches and need to learn, Seth Lugo, guys who have lots of pitches and need to learn how to attack major league hitters. It takes some time. So I have been treating Cade Povich like a streamer. I would suggest treating Cade Povich like a streamer. He gets the Yankees next, I believe. And so the Yankees are scuffling right now, but do I really want to pitch Cade Povich against Aaron Judge and Juan Soto? Like, I don't really know that I do. I think it depends on how deep your league is and what else is on the wire, but I'm treating Povich like a streamer right now.
I'm sure HP, you're like me, where you got burned on Saturday by the A's start. Cade Povich lost me a matchup this week where in one lineup I had Jose Miranda as a points league, Jose Miranda, Christian Walker, and Ben Rice. And Cade Povich is negative on Saturday, killed the entire matchup for me. But I think the Orioles showed a vote of confidence in him by putting Cole Irvin in the bullpen rather than demoting Povich for Kramer's return from injury. So that's like you're going to get another turn or two through the rotation. And then in their AAA, I think they have Jonathan Heasley, who's a former Royal, who's a depth piece, Chase McDermott, who Povich kind of jumped and got the spot over. I believe there's another prospect there that's exciting. I can't remember. Armbruster. I think Armbruster has some command issues in AAA. So as long as the Orioles keep putting him out there, like Eric said, great ballpark, great defense, you're going to get a lot of run support. So treat them with carefulness, but getting burned by a start against the A's will usually make me rage drop a guy.
Yeah. I picked up, for the record, and it was an AL only league, AL tout, but I picked up McDermott thinking that McDermott might get some chances post All-Star break. And he's a guy with a lot of like reliever risk because of command issues, but a lot of strikeout upside. So who knows? And yeah, just not super in on Povich. Jetta says, for what it's worth, Caminero is back playing. FCL rehab, already homered today. Junior Caminero is an interesting case because now that it seems like the Rays are selling, right, given the Aaron Savali deal, I don't know if that helps or hurts Caminero, because I think that given that he's battled injuries pretty much all year and the Rays are not trying to contend right now, I think that might slow down their desire to call him up, which already didn't seem particularly fast. But like, I just don't know. I don't see a reason for them to rush him. And if you think about like, oh, well, maybe they'll trade pieces that are ahead of him. I don't know that they are. Like, are they going to trade Isaac Paredes? Like, I don't know. I mean, he's their all-star. Like, and he's under team control. I don't know that they're going to deal him. Are they going to deal Yandy Diaz? Like, I don't really think so. It's possible, but I don't know. And so like, who's going to be dealt to open up the playing time for Caminero? And if nobody is there really a reason for the Rays to push him up into the lineup in a season where they're not trying to contend? So it's tough, man. I don't really know. What do you think the Rays are going to do with Caminero second half of the year?
I think the obvious trade candidate for the Rays is probably Brandon Lau. Like, he seems to be the one, but that doesn't really open anything up for Caminero. I mean, let's talk about trading Paredes is interesting. I just don't know who. I mean, people can't even trade Paredes in their fantasy leagues. Like, I don't know if they'll be able to trade him in like real baseball.
He has a very specific approach.
Yeah, and these all because of the Rays. And
and it would work in like Houston with the Crawford boxes in left field, but like they're not trading for Paredes. It would be very team specific with Paredes. It's
funny too, because talk about that Savali trade as being like a signal that the Rays were selling. But the player that got back, I can't remember his name, but he had such a similar offensive profile to these guys like Paredes.
It was like Gregory Barrios, I think was his name.
Someone who is struggling to lift and pull the ball, but who has like a good hit tool and a good command of strike zone, which is like just classic Rays. But as long as it doesn't affect Caminero's potential for service time to win Rookie of the Year next year, I could see them just wanting to get his feet wet. I don't know if him getting his feet wet contributes that much to, the end of a fantasy baseball season, but it comes back to the same shitty thing where it's like sometimes you have to just use some game theory in fantasy baseball and like who on the waiver wire can get hot enough to sway this season. And there's a chance that is Junior Caminero. And why let him toil away at the Durham Bulls the rest of the year? Maybe they want to win a championship. Maybe that the Rays are very proud of the success of the Durham Bulls year over year. But it's just, again, don't think about Junior Caminero as a savior, but think about him as like more of like a piece or like a weapon, like on your own pursuit. Because I don't think the Rays are going to just hand him the keys to, like you said, 2 positions that are full, unless they do the whole Junior Caminero shortstop thing again. And we're like, we don't care to take 30 days, play Major League shortstop, see if you could do it. Because we don't care about 28-year-old Tanner Walls.
And that may happen in September, right? When he's no longer, he can still maintain his rookie eligibility, which I think is now going to be the thing. Like, important. He's going to maintain his eligibility now that they're not contending. So Caminero is no longer like an ideal stash for me. I get wanting to hold him, but I think it may just be a little while.
Yeah.
We got a Twitch question. Jared Kelenic has been pretty good the last 30 days. If by pretty good, you mean the 11th ranked outfielder in fantasy baseball, on the Fangraphs player rater, by hitting 288 over his last 113 plate appearances with 7 home runs, 5 steals, 15 runs scored, and 17 RBIs. Would you trade for him? Yes. And then would you play him over somebody like, say, a Suzuki? I think at this point right now, if you have Jared Kelenic on your team, you're playing him over legitimately everybody, unless you're in like a 3 outfield league, and you also somehow have like Brandon Nimmo and Byron Buxton and other guys who are like similarly on fire right now, and you might just have to worry about like, which hot hitter am I playing? But I can't see an argument for playing too many guys over Kelenic the way he's playing right now.
No, since Kelenic got inserted to the leadoff spot on June 15th, he has a 140 WRC plus, 28% strikeout rate. I'm scrolling around the Fangraphs dashboard right now, getting the crazy stats. But in terms of the regular ones, 6 homers, and that's only in 96 plate appearances. 292, 333, 539 triple slash. So that's an OPS that's approaching 900. He's fantastic. I want to know about the rest of this outfield. The fact that Seiya Suzuki's in danger of also being sacked. He's also hitting really well right now. He's going to take the downturn the last few weeks, but Kelenic's awesome. And if you're hitting first in the Braves lineup, like, you're going to have so many opportunities. That game on Sunday against Michael Mercado, who had this great first start for the Phillies, then the Braves just jumped on him. He seemed like completely unwilling to throw a strike the first time around the batting order. And then it got to the bottom, and Arcia and whoever was hitting 8th for the Braves got base hits. Kelenic hit a home run. Riley hit a home run. Alston hit a home run. Once Mercado came in the order, it's just like when you're part of a murderer's row like that, you kind of are playing cat and mouse with the pitcher. You get everything. The rising tide lifts the boats. And Kelenic right now could be. We don't like to throw his word around a lot, but he seems like a bit of a league winner.
And that's also the reason why, like, in a lot of formats right now, I'm more than happy to pick up Eddie Rosario, who's back in the Braves lineup. And they face all righties this week. And it's like, it's a deep league play, but like, Eddie Rosario is a starting left fielder for the Braves again. It's important just to understand that. Like, Michael Harris will come back eventually. Michael Harris will probably take that spot. But then again, Adam Duvall has been pretty terrible, so they could probably all coexist. But like, Eddie Rosario is a starting outfielder for the Braves right now. Who knows what's going to happen at the deadline? But remembering that Eddie Rosario, even though he was bad on the Nationals this year, hit 255 with 21 homers for the Braves last year. Like, he can be good in that lineup, and you can be picking him up in deeper formats. Mike wants to know if we like Birdsong. His park is favorable. In general, I do love bird songs. They're calming. They make me happy to be outside. There is nothing calming about Hayden Birdsong. Watching him pitch is an anxiety attack. If you have any interest in it whatsoever, I get that he has some good stuff. The fastball to me is not great. Like, 95 miles an hour on the fastball with poor shape is not a great combination. And when I watch him pitch, there are just way too many pitches that are utterly just like non-competitive, like not even close to the strike zone. And so I can't see it. And also, they have Robbie Ray probably making his return after the All-Star break. He's already made, like, I think 3 AAA starts. And so I expect Robbie Ray to come back. And then I think Robbie Ray is going to take Birdsong's spot in the rotation. So yeah, I'm not in on Hayden Birdsong.
Yeah, for lack of a better term, the command is bad, and the command being bad contributes to his changeup right now having the worst run values per 100 pitches of any changeup in baseball. He has even a -5 run value in the limited time he's been in the league. Hitters are not good sample size because it's not been a long time, but hitters are batting over 500 against that changeup, and that changeup is really critical for Birdsong because if he wants to get a lefty out, he's going to have to use that because he's a very slider forward pitcher, especially to the right-handed batters. It's just not. Yeah, it's probably he might be good at some point. There's a lot of good things he does stuff wise. We just might not be ready yet. And the Giants have players coming back, so probably not worth more in these like couple spot starts, like pick your streaming spots.
Yeah. We got a couple more questions left, probably another like 5 minutes or so. So we do have some time if you want to get in an extra question or two. HP just got another one in. Wants to know, is Clark Schmidt worth stashing? So any of these type of questions about stashing for me are like super league dependent in terms of how many IL spots do you have? Like, you know, are you in a keeper league? Are you not in a keeper league? And so like, I think Clark Schmidt is coming back this year. There's the whole, anytime you get the whole like reevaluation, right? Like he's going to miss X number of weeks and then he'll be reevaluated. You like never really know for sure how long he'll be out. But the Yankees are contending. Clark Schmidt was somebody who I was really, I felt was turning a corner this year. And so I was kind of happy to see him develop. You know, lat strains take a little while, but yeah, I mean, I think he's probably going to be back like end of July, early August, right? I believe was where we were at with Clark Schmidt. So yeah, let's say he's back in August. He's back in like 3 weeks. If you have an IL spot, like, you know, I'd love to see him be ready to start making rehab appearances because that will make it a little bit easier. He's going to need a few starts. But yeah, I could see it.
The issue with Clark Schmidt right now is not really a Clark Schmidt problem. Is more of what decision the Yankees are going to make. Is that they have a 5-man rotation right now of Garrett Cole, Luis Gil, Nestor Cortez Jr., Marcus Stroman, and I'm forgetting someone obvious. Who am I forgetting? Yankees rotation.
Rodon.
And Carlos Rodon, yeah. So that
who has not been good, by the way.
Very obvious. So then
they're not moving it. Yeah.
So Schmidt comes back, who goes out? Like I think we've all assumed it was Luis Gil. He finally has first good, like really good start again on Sunday against the Red Sox. But that I don't know if I don't know. Especially if Schmidt can't come back, if there's any other setback, it's without an obvious spot in the rotation. That makes him being stashed a little bit more tenuous.
Yeah, it could be a 6-man rotation situation, right? Because Heel has been, you know, innings limit and has been questionable. Rodon has not been particularly good. They could just like skip some starts and mix some guys around, but that is a good point. Dad asks a Yankee question too, which is, do we expect Ben Rice's playing time to go down dramatically when Rizzo returns? I don't. I think the Yankees were, I don't want to say the word happy because I don't think people are happy when a player gets injured. But I think it saved the Yankees a lot of trouble that Rizzo got injured and they were able to put him on the 60-day IL because I think he was losing that job. He's been bad for over a calendar year. I don't believe Rizzo goes back to being a full-time first baseman when he comes back. I don't see it. He's been really bad. The Yankees are competing for a postseason. Anytime you hear comments about Rizzo, it's all about locker room presence, great leader, locker room. Like he could do that while not being activated. You know what I mean? And so I think some of it will depend on the health of Giancarlo Stanton as well, because that will also, if he's back, that clogs up the DH spot. But yeah, I don't. If Ben Rice keeps playing well, he's getting on base consistently, and that's why they've put him in the leadoff spot. I just don't see how you move Ben Rice out of the lineup for an aging first baseman who's been terrible.
Yeah, sometimes this isn't as much about reading tea leaves as it is about like seeing the obvious things in front of us. If the Yankees think that Ben Rice is good enough to hit leadoff in front of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, he's probably way too good to be ever taken out of this lineup. And that's like he is. The game on Saturday kind of shifts everything. It went from him having like middling stat lines to being like, wow, this guy's been having one of the hottest Julys in baseball, but he looks good. Like we told you guys this last few weeks that a guy like Ben Rice, who showed power, showed plate discipline, already 25 years old, given an opportunity, like even if the stats aren't like really poppy and like really sexy for a few weeks, like you hold because there could just be a lightning rod in that bat, and it happened. And there is nothing he's doing right now that doesn't look sustainable. Not sustainable to the way that he's going to maintain, these gaudy numbers. He's not going to hit like 15 more home runs in the second half, but he's a good baseball player, and he's built for that short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. And he's hitting ahead of possibly the two best hitters in baseball. Like you put all that together, and you get someone who's worth keeping here, and someone we shouldn't really be worried about just for Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah, if the Yankees took Ben Rice out of the lineup and put Rizzo back in to close the season, and Rizzo continued to hit like 180, I think the entire city of New York would storm the stadium and rip Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman and whoever out of their offices, and it would not happen. I can't see it happening.
Who would even hit leadoff? Like they just took
Nobody.
Anthony Volpe out of leadoff, who's their prize prospect.
DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu.
You can't hit to a double play if you're hitting leadoff.
It's true. Good Joe says Nick Lodolo or Gavin Williams rest of season. I've always been a Lodolo fan. I'm gonna lean Lodolo here also for health purposes. In that, like, I love that Gavin. So just to tease, Gavin Williams will be in my mixing it up pitch mix article coming out on NBC Sports tomorrow, looking at his kind of like harder slider that he's been throwing. He averaged 97.5 on the fastball last night. Gavin Williams' fastball was really good last night. The curveball was good. It was in the zone. He had an elbow injury in the spring, had a setback, has had no surgery. We saw what's happening with Brian Wu, where like he's healthy, but his elbow flares up every now and then. I don't know that. I think we could easily see that with Gavin Williams as well. I'm happy to take a gamble on both of these guys. Lodolo's injury issues in the past have not been arm related. And I have always kind of been a little bit of a sucker for Lodolo, so I guess I lean there, but I think it's close. But I would lean Lodolo.
It's close, and if it's that close, you almost have to lean Williams just because of the ballpark. I mean, that ballpark actually is playing pretty hitter friendly now.
Yeah, and the team Lodolo. Context is probably better with Cleveland.
Yeah,
but the injury issue is like a little bit more concerning with Williams. It's tough, man. It's a tough question.
Yeah, and because they're both injury prone as well. Like this, I don't want to tell someone you can't go wrong with either of them, but this is like the opposite of a Sophie's choice. Like this is like the opposite of a rock and hard place. You're like stuck between a soft place and a pillow. Like, all right, I pick one of these guys, like, and one that might get injured. But I'm such a sucker for Williams' his profile, just like the nice writhing backspinning fastball with a big curveball on top of it. Like that plays against guys both sides of the plate. I don't think Lodolo has necessarily a bad split situation, but Williams is just more of the obvious good power pitch in front of your face, where Lodolo's a little funky, but still a lot of fun.
Yeah. What is an easy call for me is this question. Are you starting Blake Snell today or waiting to see how he does? I am absolutely not starting Blake Snell today. Blake Snell has been atrocious this year. I think we all knew he was due for regression anyway. He's been terrible. He's just coming off the IL. I tend to generally not want to start pitchers when they come off the IL, and especially not pitchers who are pitching as poorly as this before going on the IL. If he burns me against the Toronto lineup that I think is, I think fine. Like I'm willing to take that gamble. I can't start Blake Snell today.
I bench Blake Snell in weekly leagues with 2 starts on the ledger. I just like I can't. I have to see this before I see this again. So yeah, I'm not starting him. I'm gonna wait and see how he does.
Yeah, I get that. Tallulah says, shout out, please. Hey Tallulah, thanks. Thanks for coming. Thanks for liking our show. We do really appreciate it. We'll end with this one. I think it's a good, just general fantasy question from Dad. What stats do you pay attention to when you're thinking about dropping a player? What sticks out to you that makes you say, okay, time to move on? What are those stats for you, James?
I'm trying to think in short sample. If I see dramatic increases in chase rate, or usually I will do that. For pitchers, if I see a drop in velocity, or pitchers if they're a fringe roster guy anyway, just looking ahead at the upcoming schedule. I know that's about to get turned with the All-Star breaks. We don't really know where guys will be after this week necessarily, but yeah, hitters just like, I don't know. Sometimes if I'm in a 10, 12 team league, if you're just hitting bad, like if you haven't hit a home run in a while, like I just can't hang on to that long. But when we get deeper, it's definitely more of trying to pick off specific stats. I want to see a stolen base attempts. If I have guys, my team's a bunny, and I need these steals, hold or save opportunities for relievers like that. But in terms of like longer scale, thinking about longer term, definitely seeing if someone is expanding the zone more or if a pitcher is losing their velocity.
Yeah, sometimes the answer is obvious, right? Like velocity is one, playing time is one, right? If playing time is changing or drying up, schedule is one, as you pointed out. I think the fringe guys on your roster, I really liked your point. Like those guys who are, bottom of the roster churn, like it can just be surface level stats. It can just be, hey, this guy is probably the worst hitter, second to last hitter on my 10, 12 team league team. He's not hitting right now. I'm going to drop him and I'll move and pick up somebody who is hitting. I dropped Carlos Santana in a couple 12 team leagues for hitters who are hitting better right now, not because Carlos Santana is bad, but because he's been quiet over the last 2 weeks and it's a 12 team league. And I'm happy to take a gamble on, somebody who's like a James Outman who's coming up, and I'll take a shot on that and see what happens. I think that's what you want to do with the bottom spots. Streaming starting pitchers, same thing. Like if it's a fringe starting pitcher and the schedule doesn't line up, move on. I agree with you. When you're digging in deeper, I think chase rate is really important. Swinging strike rate is really important for both hitters and pitchers. Just who's swinging and missing a lot, who is inducing swings and misses, I think are crucial. You could look at like contact rate in that sense. So like, we mentioned Zach Geloff, his fantasy stats are pretty good over the last 2 weeks, but the strikeout rate is so high. The contact rates are so low that I'm just like, it doesn't seem sustainable to me. I'm not buying in. And then pitching, I also really just like strikeout minus walk rate. I think you probably need about like a month sample for strikeout minus walk rate, maybe 3 starts, 4 starts from a starter to kind of see how that levels out. But I think it does a really good job of encompassing like who is missing bats, but who also doesn't have command that's killing you. It's a pretty simple stat there. In really short spurts, I like looking at Stuff Plus or PLV. The pitcherless PLV stat I like because it includes location into it, whereas Stuff Plus, has location plus as a separate thing. But I think those are things like after a start or two, I might say, okay, how is everything grading out? How did it look? Should I jump in on that right now?
Yeah, definitely. And also, it always comes back to K-minus walk rate. Just take the month sample of K-minus walk. You'll learn so much about pitchers. Regression candidates, got buy high, sell high, buy low candidates always helps.
Yes. Let's, for fun, we're gonna look that up really quickly while we're here.
Last month. Okay.
Starting pitchers, I'm looking since June 1st. We'll go just 20 innings pitched, so we don't have to go like full. Garrett Crochet, Tanner Bybee, Tyler Glasnow, Paul Skeens, Chris Sale, Jack Flaherty. I mean, these are all names. Funny, DJ Hers, 12th, got to
minor leagues. Yeah.
They had mentioned that was a lot of monitoring his innings because he's already near, they want to get him rest and he'll come back up later. DJ Hers is somebody I think, could be interesting later on. Andrew Heaney, 15th in K-minus walk rate since June 1st, 22.1%. Also on the trade block. We've done that dance with Heaney before. I don't know that it sticks, but he's somebody who traded could be interesting. 23rd in K-minus walk rate since June 1st is Jamison Tyone, 20.7%. I've been a Tyone fan in the past. Another guy who's on the trade block, would be interested to see where he goes. That's a situation where like, listen, the Orioles might want like a 5th starter to round out the rotation, and they could bring in a guy like Jamison Tyone, who probably won't cost a lot. He could slot into the 5th spot in the rotation. Those type of like possible landing spots really interest me. What if Jamison Tyone went to the Braves because they wanted a 5th starter to help with Schwellenbach and Reynaldo Lopez or whatever? Be curious to see that. Reese Olson, 25th in baseball since June 1st with a 20% K-minus walk rate. I think Reese Olson is under rostered. He's been great over the last month. He had a couple bad starts when the slider and the changeup failed him, but I'm trying to pick up Reese Olson wherever I can. I still think he's hovering around like 50% rostered in Yahoo format. So there's a lot of leagues where he's still available.
Some of my favorites from this list, deeper league, Luis Ortiz. He's
Yes.
getting a big opportunity in the Pirates rotation with Jared Jones' injury. He'd been in it for a turn before Jones went down, but he's always been a stuff plus darling, has a wicked slider that he's now using as his primary pitch to work off of 98-mile-an-hour sinkers and fastballs. He looked unhittable against the Mets over the weekend. That was now 3 consecutive really, really, really good outings for him in a row. 22% K- walk rate, 18th in the league since June 1st. That goes with Sierras, ERAs, everything to match, with a really, really extraordinarily high BABIP, 350. So that's like, it could be something better there. Also, I think Bailey Ober and Michael King, 2 guys who started the year poorly, whose ERAs probably don't reflect how good they've actually been. 20th and 22nd in strikeout - walk rate, both hovering around 21%. 2 guys who, if you play in 10-team league, they might be hanging out there. It's probably worth getting hot the rest of the year, but 2 guys who might really, really pitch well down the stretch.
Yeah. Last week's mixing it up column, I looked at Luis L. Ortiz. I would encourage you to check that out on NBC Sports. He's throwing a cutter this year, primarily as an early in the count pitch to lefties to get ahead. Sets up the slider, sets up the fastball. It's a huge shift for him. So that's something I can co-sign on for Luis L. Ortiz. That's going to do it for us today on the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Q&A. We'll be back again next Tuesday as we head into the All-Star break. 1 o'clock again next Tuesday. Feel free to ask us any fantasy baseball questions, any trade deadline questions. We're happy to talk baseball next Tuesday. Really any kind of baseball. So again, set a reminder, 1 p.m. next Tuesday here on YouTube. You can follow both of us on Twitter. I am at Samulski NYC and James is at James_Schiano. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.